Hey, peace, family. This is Ikemba Jure of We Charge Colonialism Podcast and Book Club, coming to you with another study session going over the Blueprint for Black Power by Dr. Amos N. Wilson. It's a pleasure to be examining this book and going over this with everybody that is viewing. And I just want to make sure that I'll let you know to subscribe to our channel, We Charge Colonialism, and like and share this podcast and book club. We do a series of these discussions covering a plethora of books. All of it is about the decolonization of the minds and bodies of African people. These discussions is very important. How we are going to take these theories and put it into practice is the objective of having these discussions and these readings. So this series, this is my sixth examination of the Blueprint for Black Power. The objective is to go through this whole book. It may take a long time, it may take 2 or 3 years just to get through the whole book. It's about 900 pages. But I think it's very important that we study and embody the lessons that has been given to us by our ancestor, Dr. Amos N. Wilson. And so today I'm on page 7, and I'm going to go through a couple of paragraphs. Make sure you like and share. These discussions isn't meant to be long. It's really to go through a paragraph or two, reflect on that, examine it a bit, and hopefully we can take that information and be able to apply it in our daily lives. So I'm on page 7 at the bottom, the typology of power, Again, like and share this podcast and book club, and I'm gonna get right into it. So the typology of power, in perhaps its most general sense, Rowley May defines power as the ability to cause or prevent change. Power is fundamentally ambivalent in that it exists in both latent and manifest forms. It's both stabilizing and destabilizing, both a causal factor in bringing about certain changes in social and environmental circumstances, as well as preventing them. Power may conceivably refer to the ability to achieve a desired goal or to the ability to willfully resist or overcome certain social and environmental conditions imposed on oneself by others, or the ability to impose on others against their will or outside their awareness certain social, environmental circumstances and behavioral demands. So in that paragraph right there, one of the things that jumps out to me is the sentence where he says, a power may conceivably refer to the ability to achieve a desired goal or the ability to willfully resist or overcome certain social and environmental conditions. So he's saying social and environmental conditions. One of the things that, if we look at our ancestors, and one of the struggles that we had as African people, as a sovereign people, right, in our communities, one of the biggest factors that we had to overcome was the environmental conditions. Most of our history has been dealing with not necessarily a power struggle among different groups of human beings, but more so a power struggle against or struggle against environmental conditions, being able to create situations where food, clothing, and shelter wasn't something that was that we had a dearth of these things, right? That there was a lack of these things. So we were trying to create situations where it was predictable. Food, clothing, and shelter, being able to have access to those things is predictable. Once you're able to predict those things, you have a sort of control over the environment. And so that's why with the agricultural revolution, that was such a breakthrough, because that's when human beings begin to control their environment, a predictable food source, even though it was still subject to environmental conditions, right? You know, whether it was a flood or a drought, right? Lack of rain, and you had drought. So still subject to environmental conditions, but there was a certain level of control that humans begin to have. But also within those sort of societies, what you have though is individual. You had personal. This is when societies, communities begin to become more complex, and you have more struggles between individuals, because now, I mean, to be quite frank, like agricultural society, once we begin to create urban communities, and systems become people begin to gain a certain amount of wealth within those societies because of specialization, right? Stratification began to exist within those communities, and you begin to have individual personal struggles that took place, power struggles between different individuals within that society. But also, it was power struggles begin against other groups of people as well in those agricultural societies. When once they begin to develop, and you have a larger populations of people, when there was when they was uh, subjected to certain environmental conditions where they didn't have access to reliable food sources, this is when you have empire building and colonialism came into play. But not to go too deep into that history, but the point though I wanted to make in regards to this is like you have environmental conditions is one thing, and then social his ability to overcome social conditions, which is now you're talking about struggles against other groups of people when we're talking about social conditions. And this struggle that African people have been facing in regards to social conditions have been one of colonialism. This is the social condition that African people are subjected to. And I'm talking about on the continent and in the diaspora. And so going into the next paragraph, though, to make this connect, because I want to just briefly look at what Europeans were able to do in regards to overpowering indigenous and African people when they came to the Americas and when they came to Africa, looking at that, but just understanding in the second paragraph, and then I'll go into that, um, what in regards to defining power and in the two different ways that power can be exercised. And so instances, this is the first paragraph on page 8. Instances of defining power as the ability to or power to include the definition of power as the ability to get what one wants, as the capacity of some persons to produce intended and unforeseen effects on others, or as the ability a person or group has to produce intended effects upon the world around them and to realize their purposes within it, whatever these purposes happen to be, right? And so one of the things under colonialism, African people have only been able to exercise this in a limited way because we have been subjected to a dominant a group that has been able to dominate us politically and economically. And so when you look at the history of African people, there's always, in the systems of oppression, there's always going to be resistance. And so there has been this history or tradition of radicalism or resistance within the African community to liberate ourselves from these colonial conditions. But then one of the things that Europeans have been able to do in the exercise of power, because what they have done over the last 600 years as it pertains to African people, the power that they have exercised is force. They've been able to exercise manipulation. They've been able to exercise coercion, amongst other things as well. But when you look at that first contact that Europeans have made with indigenous people, African people, one of the things that they did to overcome African and indigenous people, it wasn't necessarily manipulation was part of it, but it wasn't anything legitimate that they did. They didn't have any legitimate authority. They couldn't come to indigenous African people and say, give us your land because we are more powerful than you. Like we are destined to rule you. No, they had to manipulate and use force to overcome indigenous and African people to take that land. And so later on, there was this legitimation. They've been able to legitimize their authority, right, through manipulation and influence over time. And what has happened, what sustains or maintains their power, is African people and indigenous people accepting that legitimation. And so what we have done, just generally speaking, we have seen, a people dominate us and develop a system of exploitation and oppression. And the only way that we can see a path to our salvation is to integrate within the system and take on the values of those people who are oppressed and exploited us. So we have adopted the system of the oppressor and exploiter, because we have, like, we haven't developed a revolutionary ideology or education. There has been people who have developed it, but overall we haven't adopted that as a nation, as a people. And so this is what keeps the European in power. The Europeans created something and said, hey, like, this is the system, capitalism. All you have to do, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, individual responsibility, all types of, this doctrine that they have created to sort of legitimize the system and then put the onus on the individual. But what we have to do as African people and indigenous people, black people in general, whatever term you use, those people who represent the subjugated and oppressed under this system, we have to adopt a philosophy of revolution in which we're looking to develop a system outside the limitations of the system that we're in right now. We have to develop our own rules and way of life. So, and this is the mind state of Uhuru. I see my comrade. Appreciate everybody tuning in. So, I just wanted to do this quick. Maybe I'll read another paragraph. I'm on page 8. I like to keep these short. I'm gonna read one more paragraph. So I'm on page 8. It says, power as the power over, in contrast to power as the power to, emphasizes the use of power by one person or group to constrain or restrict the possibilities or options of another person or group. Power over refers to power that is exercised over an agent, that is, a person or group, when he is not able to act freely, that is, with a full set of possibilities available to him. Woudenberg explicates the concept of power over more clearly in the following statements. An agent who acts in a context in which someone else has power over her is not able to do as she wishes, but faces a situation in which the structure of her action environment is in the control of someone else. She is therefore not in the normal circumstances of human action, and as a result, her responsibility for her actions is modified, right? And again, like, this particular theme in this first chapter is really setting up what the framework that we need to be using and looking at the rest of this book too. He's just kind of trying to set up, like, understanding what power is and the importance of understanding our relationship with other people as a group, the group relationships, right, with other people, and how power is being exercised and not exercised. As a people, he talks about power to and power over. So power to do something, right? We all, throughout our daily lives as individuals and as a group, we are doing something, we are exercising power. But to what ends? I think, like, that's one thing that we have to keep in mind. We're exercising power to what ends? We all have the power to do something. But power over is another type of power. When you have power over somebody, when you can get someone else to do something, to use their power to do a particular thing, right? If I have power over you, I don't necessarily have to do anything, right? I don't have to work if I have the power to over someone to get them to work for me, right? And so this is the type of relationship that you have under colonialism, where there's a ruling class where they had power over a large majority of people, masses of people, and they can get them to think a certain way, right? Power to make someone think a certain way, and they can make them behave. If you can control a person's mind, you can control their actions. And so you can control their habits. What's that saying? Control a person's thinking. You can control their actions. You control their actions. You can control their you can, like, dictate their habits and their character and their personality, and all of that is connected, right? And so, this is very important when we think about the colonizer being able to control our behavior, our habits, and our personality, or have some influence over that. And so even when we're being, using kuumba, right? We're going to use some Kiswahili. When we're showing our creativity, we're still showing our creativity under a system of colonialism and oppression. And so it's impacted by that. Just think of how much more creative we can be under a system of that we were in control of, if we were a sovereign people, a liberated people, right? How much our creativity has to be adjusted and limited in the extent because we're under a system that limits our thinking and our behavior. And so once we begin to think outside the box though and become revolutionary, then it is no limit, right? There's nothing more freer than a person who is their actions and their thoughts is focused on uhuru, is focused on freedom. Like everything you do is about liberation and freedom. Once you develop that sort of mindset and behavior, then you're free already. But if you're ignorant to the limitations and the influence that other people and groups have on you, then that's a type of mental enslavement that ignorance, right, is a type of mental enslavement that it's almost like a hell. It's like something you can't never escape from that because you're not even aware that you're in that state of imprisonment. So, with that being said, though, I think I went way beyond, I think I doubled the time this time. But it is the holiday, so I want to say, peace to everybody. I did a video short. Y'all can check that out about an hour ago on Umoja Karamu. Umoja Karamu is a Black holiday that was created in 1971 by Dr. Edward Sims Jr. as an alternative to Thanksgiving. So all my folks that want to keep it African, want to keep it Black in our tradition and our holidays, look more into Umoja Karamu. We're going over 50 years of celebrating that and celebrate it on the fourth Sunday of every November. So, I'ma always keep it Black, and you should do the same. So appreciate you all for tuning in. Make sure you like and share this. And until next time, I'm doing everything. I'm the producer too. But to the next time, I want to say peace, y'all. Y'all take care. Uhuru.